The muted battle beast never let anyone touch him, until the human child called him friend. The prison station floated in the darkest part of space, far from any sun or planet. They called it Nine, and it held the worst criminals in the galaxy. Murderers sat in cells here. Pirates who had burned whole planets lived behind these walls. But in the deepest part of the station, behind walls thick enough to stop a starship's weapons, they kept something different. They kept. He had no other name now. The prison records called him Subject 7714, but the guards whispered when they thought no one could hear. It was a word from an old, dead language. It meant steel that bends but never breaks. Long ago, before anyone could remember, a powerful race called the Precursors had created his kind. They had built the to-be-living weapons, stood 8 feet tall. His body was covered in scales harder than metal. He had 4 arms, and each arm ended in claws that could cut through the walls of a spaceship. His eyes glowed like melted copper, and they had seen more battles than most soldiers could imagine. But the thing that scared everyone most was his voice, or rather, the voice he used to have. That had been made with 2 throats. The second throat was special. It could make sounds so powerful they could break bones. They could stop a heart from beating. They could kill without touching. When the coalition had finally caught after years of hunting, the first thing they did was cut out that second throat. They took his weapon. They took his voice. Now could not speak. He could not roar or growl or make any sound at all. He could only breathe in silence. A voice came through the speaker in his cell. "Feeding time, monster." A small door opened in the energy wall that kept him trapped. A tray of paste slid through. This was his food. It had no taste, no smell. It was just enough to keep him alive. Did not move from his corner. He had not eaten in 3 days. What was the point of eating? What was the point of anything? He was the last one. The coalition had hunted every in the galaxy. They were afraid of his kind, afraid of weapons they could not control, so they had killed them all. Every male, every female, every child had survived only because they wanted to study him. They wanted to cut him open and learn how he worked. They wanted to make sure nothing like him could ever exist again. Closed his copper eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to have a voice. He remembered the sound he used to make, deep and powerful, shaking the ground beneath his feet. He remembered his brothers and sisters, standing together, their voices joining into one great roar that could be heard across mountains. All gone now, all silent. He wrapped his 4 arms around himself and tried to disappear into the darkness of his cell. Far away in another part of space, a damaged ship moved slowly through the stars. It was a refugee transport carrying families who had escaped from the border colonies. They were running from something terrible, something called the Hollow Swarm. The swarm was a machine plague, tiny robots that ate everything they touched, metal, plastic, flesh. They would break down whatever they consumed and use it to build more of themselves. Whole planets had disappeared into clouds of dust. The coalition was losing the war against them. In the cargo hold of the transport, where the refugees slept on thin mats on the floor, a small human girl sat alone. Her name was. She was 7 years old. Her black hair was messy and her clothes were dirty. Her eyes, dark brown and too large for her thin face, stared at nothing. Had seen her parents die. She had watched the swarm take them. One moment they were there, holding her hands, telling her to run. The next moment they were dust floating in the air. The robots had eaten them and used their bodies to make more machines. Since that day, had not spoken a single word. The other refugees stayed away from her. Children were supposed to cry when bad things happened. They were supposed to scream and need hugs and ask for help. Did none of these things. She just sat and stared with her empty eyes, and the adults did not know what to do with her. "Poor little thing," they whispered to each other. "She is broken. After what she saw, she will never be normal again." Could hear them. She heard every word, but she had decided that words were useless. Words had not saved her mother and father. Words had not stopped the swarm from taking everything she loved, so she had locked her words away, put them somewhere deep inside where they could not hurt her anymore. The ship shook suddenly, red lights began to flash, a voice shouted over the speakers. "Hull breach in Section 7, everyone hold on to something." People screamed and grabbed their children. They ran for safety, pushing and shoving, but did not move. She watched the chaos around her like it was happening to someone else, like it was a dream she could not wake up from. The ceiling above her broke open. Cold rushed in, the terrible cold of space trying to pull her out into the darkness. Closed her eyes. She did not scream. She did not reach for help. She thought maybe she would see her parents again. When woke up, she was in a white room. Strange machines beeped softly around her. A tall creature with blue skin and 4 eyes stood nearby, looking at a screen. "You are awake," the creature said. "Good, you are safe now. You are on Station 9. Your ship was attacked, but we saved some of the passengers. You are going to be okay." Okay, what did that word even mean anymore? Turned her head away and looked at the white wall. The blue creature sighed. "She has not spoken since she arrived," it said to someone could not see. "The doctors say she has trauma-induced mutism. Her mind is protecting itself by refusing to let her speak. She needs special care that we cannot give her here. This is a prison, not a hospital." "Then why did they bring her here?" another voice asked. "Because we were the closest station. Because her ship was too damaged to go anywhere else. Because the universe does not care about what is convenient." Days passed. The station tried to find somewhere else to send, but there were too many refugees and not enough places to put them. So she stayed in her small white room, and the staff mostly left her alone. They had bigger problems to worry about than one silent little girl. Began to walk around the station at night. She could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw dust that used to be her parents. So she walked instead, moving through hallways and corridors, looking for something she could not name. The station's security was built to keep dangerous things inside their cells. It was not built to keep a small, quiet girl out. Found paths that no one watched. She found doors that no one had remembered to lock. She walked deeper and deeper into the station, past warning signs she could not read, through areas where the lights were dim and the air felt heavy. She did not know where she was going. She just knew she could not stop. And then, on the 5th night, she found the deepest level of the prison. The walls here were different, thicker, stronger. The air hummed with energy. Signs in many different languages told her to turn back, to go away, that danger waited ahead. Kept walking. She came to the last cell. Through the small window in the wall, she saw something that should have made her run away screaming. She saw. He was huge, and scaled and terrifying, with 4 arms and claws like knives. He sat in the corner of his cell, wrapped around himself, looking like the loneliest creature in the universe. Did not run. She did not scream. She walked up to the window and pressed her small hand against the glass. His copper eyes opened. He looked at her and something changed in his face. Confusion. Wonder. This tiny human child was looking at him without fear. She was looking at him like he was just another person. Slowly, carefully, stood and walked toward the window. He was so big that he blocked out the light. His shadow fell over like a blanket. He raised one of his massive clawed hands and pressed it against the glass on his side, matching her small hand with his huge one. Neither of them made a sound. They did not need to. In that moment, 2 broken creatures found each other in the dark. A monster with no voice and a child with no words. And something began to grow between them, small and fragile, like a seed pushing up through frozen ground. It was not hope, not yet, but it was a beginning. The muted battle beast never let anyone touch him, until the human child called him friend. The station commander was a creature called. He had hard skin like stone and small black eyes that never seemed to blink. When he was angry, his voice could make the walls shake. Right now, He was very angry. "Tell me again," said, his voice cold and sharp. "A 7-year-old human child walked past all of our security and found her way to the most dangerous prisoner in the station." The security chief, a nervous creature with too many legs, clicked his mandibles together. "Yes, Commander, we looked at the camera recordings. She did not set off any alarms. She just walked through." "And what did the prisoner do when he saw her?" "That is the strange thing, Commander." The security chief pulled up a video on the screen. "Subject 7714 has hurt everyone who ever came close to him. He killed 3 scientists who tried to examine him. He broke the arm of a guard who got too near his barrier, but when he saw the child, he just—" The chief paused, not sure how to explain. "He touched the glass, gently, like he was afraid he might scare her away." Watched the recording. The massive 8 feet of scales and deadly claws, pressing his hand against the window as softly as if he were touching a flower. On the other side, a tiny human girl with messy hair and empty eyes, her small palm flat against the glass. "Interesting," said. "Perhaps we can use this. If the child can keep subject 7714 calm, she might be useful for our research. Arrange a proper meeting between them. Controlled. Watched. I want to see what happens." "But Commander," the security chief said carefully, "the child is a refugee. She has been through terrible things. Using her as a tool to control the prisoner seems—" "Seems what?" His black eyes narrowed. "Nothing, Commander. I will make the arrangements." The next day, guards came to his room. They told her to follow them. She did not ask where they were going. She did not ask anything. She just walked behind them through the hallways until they reached a special room. One wall of the room could become see-through. On the other side was Cell. When walked in, she could see him waiting there, his copper eyes watching the door. "You may approach the viewing wall," a guard said. "Do not try to touch the controls. Do not try to run. We will be watching everything." Did not look at the guard. She walked to the clear wall and sat down on the floor, crossing her legs under her. She looked up at. Came out of the shadows. The scientists watching from another room gasped. They had never seen him move toward anyone by choice. He was always hiding, always attacking, always angry. But now he walked to the wall and slowly lowered his huge body to the floor, sitting across from. They looked at each other for a long time. The scientists wrote notes and whispered to each other, and paid no attention to them. Then raised her hand and waved. It was a simple thing, a small thing, just moving her hand back and forth, but tilted his massive head, studying the movement. Then, slowly, clumsily, he lifted one of his 4 hands and tried to copy her. His wave was awkward, his claws made it look strange, but he was trying. His mouth moved. Not a smile, not quite, but something close. Something that had not been on her face since before the swarm took her parents. She pointed at herself, then made a small circle with her hands close together. Watched carefully. She pointed at him, then spread her arms wide to make a big circle. Small, big. Understanding flickered in his copper eyes. He pointed at her and pinched his claws together, making a tiny shape. Then he pointed at himself and stretched all 4 arms out as far as they could go. Small, big. Nodded. In the observation room, the scientists were talking excitedly. "They are communicating. This is incredible. They were never supposed to be able to do this kind of thing. Their brains were designed for fighting, not for language." But the scientists did not understand what was really happening. This was not just communication. This was 2 lonely creatures reaching out to each other across a gap that should have been impossible to cross. Every day after that came to sit with, and every day their language grew. Taught him human gestures. Thumbs up meant good. Thumbs down meant bad. A hand over the heart meant feelings. A finger to the lips meant quiet or secret. 2 fingers walking meant going somewhere. Taught her body language. The way his shoulders moved showed if he was happy or sad. The angle of his head told her if he was curious or confused. His tail, the one part of him that still moved freely, could say things that words never could. They made up new signs together, signs that were just for them. A sign for hungry, for tired, for scared. A sign for the machines that had taken's parents. A sign for the voice that had been taken from. The guards and scientists watched everything, but they did not really see. They saw a monster being controlled by a child. They did not see two broken hearts slowly learning to trust again. One night had a nightmare. She dreamed of the swarm of dust, of reaching for hands that turned to nothing. She woke up crying, the first sound she had made in months, and she ran. She ran through the dark corridors of the station until she reached the cell. It was the middle of the night. No guards were watching. She pressed her hands against the cold barrier and let the tears fall down her face. Inside his cell woke from his own dark dreams. Dreams of his brothers and sisters dying. Dreams of the knife that cut out his voice. He saw there, small and shaking, and he moved to the barrier. He could not hold her. He could not speak soft words to comfort her. But he pressed all four of his hands against the wall where her hands were, and he stayed there. He did not move. He did not sleep. He just stayed with her through the long night until her tears stopped and her breathing became slow and calm. When morning came, the guards found asleep on the floor by cell, her cheek pressed against the cold barrier. On the other side, sat with his back against the wall, watching over her like a guardian made of stone and scales. They did not understand, but they let her stay. Weeks turned into months, began to change. The empty look in her eyes started to fade. She began to notice things around her again. Sometimes she almost smiled. Once she even laughed, a small sound like a bell, when tried to copy a human dance move and nearly fell over because of his tail. Changed too. The rage that had burned in him for so long began to cool. He stopped throwing himself at the barriers. He stopped snarling at the guards. He started to cooperate with the scientists who wanted to study him, as long as they did not try to touch him. He had found something worth more than anger. He had found something worth being gentle for. One day brought a small computer tablet with her to their meeting. She had been given it to help her learn since she still would not speak out loud. She typed on it for a long time, her small fingers moving carefully. Then she held it up to the barrier so could see the screen. One word glowed there in simple letters. Friend. Knew this word. He had learned to read some human words during his long time in prison, but no one had ever used this word for him. He pointed at the word with one claw, then he pointed at himself. His copper eyes were confused, uncertain. Was she saying this word about him? Nodded firmly. She pointed at the word again. Then she pointed at him. Then she pointed at herself. Then she drew a big circle in the air that held both of them inside it. Friend, you, me, together. Something happened inside. It felt like a wall falling down. A wall he had built over many years of pain and loneliness. His huge body began to shake. His copper eyes grew wet with something his species was never supposed to be able to make. Tears. He reached toward the barrier with all four arms and pressed them against it. His whole body leaned forward, trying to get as close to her as possible. If there had been no wall between them, he would have wrapped her in his arms and never let go. Stood up, she walked to the barrier and pressed her whole body against it, her arms stretched wide, hugging the wall that separated them. On one side a monster, on the other side a child, but the wall between them felt thinner now, less real. In the observation room, a guard turned away from the screen. Even he could tell that this moment was not for his eyes. They really do care about each other, another guard said quietly. Impossible, said a scientist. They cannot form emotional bonds. They were designed to be weapons, nothing more. But the guard shook his head. Then how do you explain what we are seeing? Look at him, he is crying. I did not think they could cry. The scientist had no answer. In the cell and the room beside it, and stayed pressed against the barrier for a long time. They did not need words. They did not need anything except each other. A monster and a child. A weapon and a refugee. Two creatures who had lost everything, finding something new in the ruins. They had found family. The muted battle beast never let anyone touch him, until the human child called him friend. 6 months passed on Station 9. The cold prison in the dark part of space had become something it was never meant to be. It had become a home. Was different now. The girl who had arrived silent and empty had slowly come back to life. It started with her hands, making signs with through the barrier. Then it spread to her eyes, which began to show feelings again instead of nothing. Then, one day, she opened her mouth and spoke. "Thank you," she said to a guard who brought her breakfast. Her voice was rough and quiet, like something that had been locked away for too long, but it was real. The guard nearly dropped the tray. He ran to tell the doctors, who ran to tell the scientists, who ran to tell Commander. A small miracle had happened on the prison station. The silent child had found her words again. But knew the truth. She had not found her words. She had been given them back by a monster with no voice of his own. The doctors called it a miracle of healing. They wrote papers about it and sent them to important people across the galaxy. They said many smart things about trauma and recovery and the human mind. They did not understand that it was simply the result of being seen, of being heard, of being loved by another living creature when the whole universe seemed cold and empty. Had given back her voice by listening to her silence. Now wanted to give him something back. She spent hours watching the scientists who studied. She memorized the buttons they pressed on the control panel outside his cell. She counted the guards and learned when they changed shifts. She was 7 years old, almost 8 now, but her mind was sharp and her eyes missed nothing. She could not give back his voice. The doctors had taken it away forever, but maybe, she thought, she could give him something else. Maybe she could give him a friend who was not trapped behind a wall. One night she asked a question using their sign language. "Do you want to be free?" Looked at her for a long time. His copper eyes were sad and tired. He made a sign back. "Cannot be free, monster, dangerous." "You are not a monster to me," signed. "World thinks monster, world is afraid." Pressed her hand against the barrier. "I am not afraid." Pressed his hand against hers, the cold glass between them. "I know, that is why you are different, that is why you are." He made the sign they had created together, the one that meant more than friend, more than family. A sign that had no word in any language. Smiled, it was a real smile now, not the almost smile of before. "We will find a way," she signed. "I promise." Did not believe her. How could a small human child change anything? The coalition had built this prison to hold things like him forever. The walls were too thick. The barriers were too strong. He would die in this cell, alone, and no one would remember him except as a monster in a report. But had made a promise, and she meant to keep it. Meanwhile, the galaxy continued to burn. The hollow swarm was spreading. Every week news came of another colony lost, another fleet destroyed, another million lives turned to dust. The coalition was losing the war and everyone knew it. On Station 9, the soldiers grew more nervous. The scientists worked faster, trying to find something in his body that might help them fight the machines. They took his blood and studied his scales and scanned his bones, looking for secrets. Let them do it. Before, he would have fought. Before, he would have killed anyone who tried to touch him. But now he had a reason to be calm. Every time he cooperated with the scientists, they let visit him longer. Every time he stayed peaceful, she got to sit with him for another hour. It was a trade he was happy to make. One day, a scientist came to with a special request. The scientist was young and nervous, with shaking hands and a voice that trembled when he spoke. "We need to do a scan of your throat," the scientist said. Where your resonance chamber used to be. We think there might be something useful there for our weapons research." felt the old anger stir inside him. They wanted to look at the place where they had cut out his voice. They wanted to use his pain to build more weapons. But then he saw watching from the observation room. She was making a sign with her hands, small and quick, so the scientist would not notice. Calm, safe, trust. Took a deep breath. He looked at the nervous young scientist and slowly nodded his massive head. The scientist almost fainted with relief. Thank you. I know this must be difficult for you. I will be as gentle as I can. Lay down on the floor of his cell. The scientist brought in a scanning machine and carefully ran it over his throat, over the scar where his second throat used to be. Stared at the ceiling and tried not to remember the knife, the pain, the silence that followed. Interesting, the scientist said, looking at the results. There is still some tissue here that responds to neural signals. It cannot produce sound anymore, but it still receives commands from your brain, like a speaker with no power. Did not care about the science, he just wanted it to be over. But was listening carefully. A speaker with no power. That meant's body still remembered how to make sound. It just did not have the ability anymore. She filed this information away in her mind. She did not know yet how it might be useful, but she had learned that knowledge was never wasted. That night had another nightmare, but this time it was different. She did not dream of the swarm taking her parents. She dreamed of, alone in his cell, growing old and weak, dying with no one beside him. She dreamed of the barrier still between them, cold and unbreakable, keeping her away when he needed her most. She woke up crying again, but these were different tears, not tears of memory, tears of fear for the future. She went to his cell, as she always did when sleep would not come. He was already awake, already waiting. He always seemed to know when she needed him. Bad dream, she signed through the barrier. Tell me, he signed back. I dreamed you were dying. I dreamed I could not help you. The wall was still there and I could not break it. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a sign that surprised her. Maybe wall is not just there. He touched the barrier with one claw. Maybe wall is also here. He touched his chest where his heart's beat. I have wall inside, built it long time ago, afraid to let anyone in. Watched him with her big dark eyes. You let me in, she signed. Yes, you broke my wall. Small human child broke what armies could not break. His copper eyes glowed warm in the dim light. You are strong, stronger than you know. Press both hands against the barrier. Then I will break this wall too. Someday, I do not know how yet, but I will find a way. Made the sound that was as close as he could come to a laugh. It was just air escaping from his lungs, no voice behind it, but knew what it meant. You are stubborn, he signed. I learned from you, she signed back. They sat together through the night as they had done so many times before. Two creatures who had lost everything, finding strength in each other. A monster learning to be gentle. A child learning to be brave. Outside the station, the stars burned cold and distant. The swarm continued its march across the galaxy, eating everything in its path. The coalition scrambled to build new weapons and train new soldiers. But in the deepest cell of a forgotten prison, something more important was happening. Something the soldiers and scientists and commanders could not understand. Love was growing in the dark. And love was beginning to learn, was the strongest weapon of all. She made a promise to herself as the station's artificial sunrise began to brighten the walls. She would not let die alone. She would not let him spend the rest of his life behind a barrier, unable to feel the touch of a friend. She did not know that the galaxy would soon give her a chance to keep that promise. She did not know that the swarm was coming for them. But when the time came, she would be ready. She was human, after all, and humans never gave up on the ones they loved. The muted battle beast never let anyone touch him, until the human child called him friend. The alarm screamed through the station at midnight. Woke to red lights flashing and a voice shouting through the speakers. All personnel to battle stations. Hollow swarm detected in sector. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. For one terrible moment, was back on the refugee transport. She was watching the swarm eat through the walls. She was reaching for her parents as they turned to dust. Then she heard explosions outside the station, and her fear turned into something else, something harder, something that made her get out of bed and run. Not away from the danger, toward it, toward the deepest level of the station. A guard tried to grab her as she ran past. "Child, stop, we are evacuating." Twisted away from his hands and kept running. Her bare feet slapped against the cold metal floor. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum. She knew the way to cell by memory now. She could have found it with her eyes closed. Behind her, the guard shouted for help, but the station was in chaos. Everyone was running, screaming, trying to get to the escape pods. No one had time to chase one small girl. The walls shook, heard a terrible grinding sound like 1,000 knives scraping against metal. The swarm was eating through the outer hull. They were breaking in. She ran faster. In his cell could hear everything. The alarms, the screams, the horrible sound of the machines that had destroyed so many worlds. He threw himself against the barrier again and again, his massive body crashing against the energy wall. It did not break, it was too strong. They had built it to hold him forever. He wanted to roar. He wanted to scream's name, to tell her to run, to save herself and forget about the monster in the cage. But he had no voice. He could only beat against the wall in silence, trapped and helpless while the swarm came closer. Then he heard footsteps, small footsteps running fast. Appeared at the window. Her face was red and her chest was heaving, but her eyes were steady and determined. His copper eyes went wide. He shook his head hard. He pointed toward the exit and made the sign for Go. "Run, escape, leave me behind." Shook her head just as hard. She ran to the control panel beside his cell. This was the panel she had watched the guards use so many times. This was the panel she had memorized, just in case she ever needed it. Her small fingers flew over the buttons. The first code she tried did not work. The second code did not work either. The station shook again, closer now. The grinding sound was getting louder. Pressed his hands against the barrier, watching her. His hearts were pounding so hard he could feel them in his throat, not because he was afraid for himself, because he was afraid for her. "Go," he signed, even though she was not looking at him. "Please go." She did not go. She kept pressing buttons, trying combination after combination. The lights in the hallway behind her flickered and went dark. Emergency red lights came on instead. Through the shadows could see shapes moving. Shapes, machine shapes. The swarm was here. Her fingers found another combination. She pressed it without hope, just because it was the only thing left to try. The barrier flickered and died. For one heartbeat, nothing moved. Stared at the empty space where the energy wall had been. Stared at her. Then the first swarm creature came around the corner. It was horrible. Metal twisted into the shape of something alive. Legs like knives. A body that kept changing, never staying the same shape for more than a second. Eyes that were not eyes, just sensors that glowed with cold white light. It started toward her. Moved. He was across the cell and out the door before could blink. His 4 arms reached down and scooped her up, pulling her against his chest. His scales were rough against her skin, but warm, warmer than she had expected. He turned to face the swarm creature. His copper eyes burned bright, brighter than she had ever seen them. The creature launched itself at them. His claws caught it in midair. He tore it apart with a single motion, ripping through metal like it was paper. Pieces scattered across the floor, twitching, trying to rebuild themselves. Did not wait. He crushed them under his feet and started moving, carrying against his chest with 2 arms while his other 2 arms cleared the path ahead. More swarm creatures came. 5 of them, 10, 20. They poured out of the broken walls like water, a tide of death that had destroyed whole planets. Fought through them all. He had been built for war. Every part of his body was a weapon. His claws cut through metal. His tail swept machines off their legs. His scales turned aside their attacks like armor. He was everything the precursors had made him to be. But he was fighting for something different now. Not for commanders who used him. Not for causes he did not understand. Not because it was what he was made to do. He was fighting for her. Held tight to his chest. She could feel his muscles moving under his scales, feel his heart's pounding against her ear. She could hear the terrible sounds of battle all around them, but she was not afraid. She was with, and would never let anything hurt her. They reached the evacuation bay. The doors were still open. Inside, the last escape pods were filling up with survivors. Guards were trying to keep order while scientists and refugees pushed and shoved to get inside. Then everyone saw. Weapons came up. Soldiers pointed their guns at him. A commander shouted something about the prisoner escaping. But the station commander held up his hand. Hold, everyone hold. He was staring at the massive warrior covered in swarm fluid and scorch marks, carrying a small human girl against his chest like she was the most precious thing in the universe. "Let him through," said. "Commander," a soldier asked, confused. "I said let him through, now." The soldiers lowered their weapons, walked through them, ignoring their stares, and went straight to the nearest escape pod. He sat down inside, gently, carefully, making sure she was secure in her seat. Then he turned to leave. Grabbed his arm. Her eyes were wide. She shook her head hard. She made the sign for together. Looked down at her. His copper eyes were tired. There were wounds on his body that she had not noticed before. Green blood seeped through cracks in his scales. He raised his hands and made a sign. The same sign she had made to him months ago when she had called him friend. Then he made a new sign, one they had created together for the feeling that had no name. Family. "I protect family," he signed, "always." The grinding sound was getting louder. Through the bay doors, they could see swarm creatures flooding into the corridor. There were too many of them. Even if everyone got into the pods, the machines would destroy them before they could launch. Someone had to hold them back. Someone had to buy time. Looked at one more time. He tried to memorize her face. The messy black hair, the big dark eyes, the small human girl who had looked at a monster and seen a friend. Then he turned and ran toward the swarm. Screamed. For the first time since her parents died, she screamed out loud. "No, Kang." But the pod door was closing. Hands were pulling her back. The last thing she saw was crashing into the wave of machines like a force of nature, his four arms tearing and smashing, his body burning with a light she had never seen before. And then she heard something impossible. Was screaming too. Not with his voice. They had taken that from him, but he was screaming with everything else. His bones were vibrating. His chest was shaking. A sound was coming out of him that was not a sound, but something deeper, something raw, something born from pain and love and desperate courage. The swarm creatures hesitated. Their programming stuttered. They had never encountered anything like this. A being who could scream without a voice, who had found a way to roar through sheer force of will. In that moment of hesitation, attacked, and the escape pods launched. Pressed her hands against the window as the pod shot away from the station. She watched the prison shrink behind them. She watched the swarm consuming it. She watched and waited and prayed to whatever gods might be listening. Then she saw the explosions. One flash of light, then another, then a chain reaction spreading through the station's core. Had reached the reactor. The station exploded. The swarm exploded with it. A ball of fire bloomed in the darkness of space, beautiful and terrible, like a star being born and dying at the same time. Did not scream again. She did not cry. She just pressed her forehead against the cold window and closed her eyes. "Family," she whispered, "you are my family." Around her, the other survivors in the pod sat in stunned silence. They had all seen what happened. They had all seen the monster give his life to save them. No one called him a monster anymore. The pod flew on through the darkness, carrying its passengers toward safety. Behind them, where the station had been, there was only dust and silence. But in his heart something remained, a warmth that the cold of space could not touch, a love that death could not erase. Was gone, but he had not left her alone. He had given her something that would last forever. He had given her the strength to live again. And she would use it. She would make his sacrifice mean something. She would make sure the galaxy remembered him not as a monster, but as what he truly was. A warrior, a protector, a friend. A family. The muted battle beast never let anyone touch him, until the human child called him friend. 3 years had passed since the station exploded. 3 years since had watched disappear into fire and light. 3 years of healing, learning, and growing into someone new. Was 10 years old now. She lived on a beautiful planet far from the darkness of space, in a small house near the ocean. The sound of waves helped her sleep at night. The warmth of the sun helped her remember that the universe was not all cold and empty. She had changed so much. The broken, silent girl from the refugee transport was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who had learned that even the worst pain could become the foundation for something good. Had started talking again after died, really talking. She told everyone who would listen about him, about the monster who was not a monster, about the friend she had found in the darkest place in the galaxy, about the family she had made with a creature everyone else had feared. At first, people did not believe her. They were supposed to be mindless weapons. They were not supposed to feel love or friendship or anything at all, but had recordings. She had the videos the scientists had made. She showed them to reporters and teachers and anyone who would watch. Slowly, people started to understand. The coalition had done a terrible thing. They had hunted the to extinction because they were afraid. They had killed an entire species because it was easier than trying to understand them. And in the end, one of those monsters had given his life to save the very people who had locked him in a cage. Today was a special day. Walked up a hill overlooking the ocean, carrying a small bundle of flowers. The wind blew her black hair across her face, but she did not brush it away. She liked feeling the wind. It reminded her that she was alive. At the top of the hill stood a memorial. It was not large or fancy, just a simple stone with words carved into its surface. Here is RMMBRDKANG of the THORRAKI. Last of his kind. Monster prisoner, warrior. Friend. Family. Knelt before the stone and placed the flowers at its base. She did this every year, on the anniversary of the day had saved her. She would do it every year for the rest of her life. "Hello," she said softly, "I am back." The stone did not answer. Of course it did not. Was gone, scattered into atoms by the explosion that had destroyed the swarm, but liked to think that some part of him could still hear her. Some part of him was still watching over her, the way he had watched over her through all those nights in the prison. "I gave a speech today," she said, "at the academy. They are training me to be that is a person who helps different species communicate with each other. The teachers say I have a gift for it." She smiled a little. "I wonder where I learned that." She had learned it from him, of course. From the months they had spent creating a language together. From the signs and gestures and silent conversations that had saved both of their lives. "They are saying different things about you now," continued. "In the school books, they call you a hero instead of a monster. They say the deserved better than what was done to them. I think they are finally starting to understand." She paused, listening to the sound of the waves far below. A bird flew overhead, calling out in a language she did not speak. I am going to make sure everyone knows, she said, about you, about what you were really like. Not the monster they made you, but the friend you chose to be, the family you chose to make. She stood up and pressed her hand against the cold stone. It was the same gesture she had made so many times against the barrier of his cell. Hand to hand, heart to heart. I will come back next year, she said, and the year after that, and every year until I am old and can barely walk up this hill. She made the sign one last time, the sign they had created together for the feeling that had no name. Family, thank you for everything, for seeing me when no one else did, for teaching me that I was not broken, for showing me that love can exist in the darkest places. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and thank you for being my friend. She turned and started walking back down the hill. Behind her, the memorial stone stood silent against the sky, but it was not just a stone anymore. It was a promise, a reminder, a lesson that the galaxy was only beginning to learn. As walked, she thought about the future. She would graduate from the academy. She would become a. She would travel to far planets and meet new species and help them understand each other. She would spend her whole life building bridges between creatures who thought they were too different to connect. Because she knew something now, something that had taught her without ever speaking a single word. Monsters were not born, they were made by fear and loneliness and the cruelty of those who refused to understand. But they could be unmade too, by kindness, by patience, by the simple act of looking at someone different and seeing not a threat but a person. The were gone was gone, but his legacy would live on. Every time helped two species communicate, every time she taught someone that different did not mean dangerous, she was continuing what he had started. She was proving that even a monster could love, and even a child could change the world. Far above her, the stars were beginning to appear as the sun set over the ocean. Somewhere out there, new species were being born, new conflicts were brewing, new walls were being built between creatures who were afraid of each other. But there were also people who refused to give up, people who looked at walls and saw challenges to overcome instead of barriers that would last forever. Humans were strange. They were small and fragile and lived such short lives, but they had something that no other species possessed. They had the stubborn, impossible ability to care about things that logic said they should fear. They looked at monsters and saw friends. They reached into the darkest cells and found hearts worth saving. They had been created for war. They had been built to destroy. But because of one small human child, the last of them had died for love. And that, thought as she reached the bottom of the hill, was what it really meant to be human. Not to be the strongest, not to be but to be the ones who kept trying, who kept reaching out, who kept believing that even the coldest heart could learn to feel warmth. Had learned, he had changed, he had become something his creators never intended. He had become kind. And now it was turn to spread that kindness through the galaxy, to show everyone that the universe did not have to be cold and cruel, that there was another way. She reached her small house near the ocean. Inside, her adopted family was waiting for her. Good people who had taken in a broken refugee girl and helped her heal. They had given her a home, but had given her something more. He had given her hope. She looked back up at the hill one more time. The memorial was too far away to see, but she knew it was there, waiting, remembering. "Goodbye," she whispered, "until next year." Then she went inside, where dinner was waiting and laughter was warm and the future was bright. The monster and the child, the weapon and the refugee, the silence and the voice. Their story was over, but what it meant would last forever. Because love knew now was the one thing that could not be destroyed, not by time, not by distance, not even by death. It just changed form, it spread, it grew. And as long as people remembered, as long as they told his story and learned from his sacrifice, he would never truly be gone. He would live on in every act of kindness, every moment of understanding, every time someone chose to see a friend instead of a monster. That was his real legacy, not destruction, not war. Love, and would spend the rest of her life making sure the galaxy never forgot it. The end.